We are back. That's right. We are back to the show of Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. We are back. I am back on the show of the Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. This is show number 51. Show number 51. And it's entitled George Floyd, 1 year later. That's right, George Floyd, 1 year later. Hello, folks. I am Dr. B, and I am continuing with the Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus podcast show. And I want to thank you for staying with us for over this past year and a half, almost 2 years, but year and a half of so many different events that have happened in our country from just 2020 to 2021. And just the other day, we hit a milestone, and that is the 1 year tragedy of George Floyd. And I want to share a few of my thoughts and my observations, what I've seen over the past just a few weeks and few days, and just yesterday, of how our country recognized this 1 year tragedy and yet acknowledged it in different ways. So that's what show number 51 will be about. And I will go back a little bit of my shows from last year to now and just give you a chronology of what happened after that tragic event of George Floyd. But before I get to that, I want to thank our sponsors. I want to thank Podbean. Thank you, Podbean. Also, Podbean for acknowledging our shows over 1,000 downloads, and we're still going strong. So thank you, Podbean, for recognizing our continuation and the support and the downloads that have occurred as we continue to do our shows. We're going to thank again Podbean. I want to thank iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Tune in, Listen FM, iHeartRadio. And I want to thank Audible. For those of you who are on Amazon, Audible has picked up our podcast and really featured it. So thank you, Audible. And of course, I want to thank my 2018 book, Race and Ethnic Relations on Campus, Understanding Empowerment and Solutions for College Students. And so there you go. Again, I want to, it is kind of interesting to see what has occurred since last year. And before I get to that chronology, just last month, I'm sure you're aware, and I didn't want to do a show on this because that's the reason I kind of delayed. The perpetrator, the police officer, Derek Chauvin, his trial had occurred last month in April, and the jury made its decision in April, actually April 20th, 2021. And Derek Chauvin, the police officer who unfortunately held George Floyd to the ground, he was charged for the murder of George Floyd and found guilty by the jury on all charges. So, in that respect, justice was served. And let me just say, if it wasn't for the brave person who recorded everything on that video on their cell phone, that unfortunate event in which that chokehold, that kneeling down with his knee on George Floyd's neck, causing him to pass away, to die, wouldn't have that visible evidence. So again, 1 year later, the jury decided that the police officer, in all his rights, was found guilty on all charges. So again, that had occurred last month, and just yesterday there was acknowledgement across the country in different ways, and even the family of George Floyd was met by our President Biden, and at the White House, and they were given proper recognition and support by our President Biden, and to acknowledge the how bad that was, and how a new laws and new agenda has been put in place in our country to provide better policing for all police officers across the country. So that's what was done politically. And yet, in the country, and let me just say, I don't know how the rest of the country feels, and different organizations have acknowledged this 1 year anniversary since that tragic event in different ways, and basically making statements of how the world has changed since the outrage of that had occurred, and how we have improved as a society since then, with all the movement, the let me say, the race agenda, consciousness, the acknowledgement, the initiatives, the discussions, the town halls, all of this that happened over the past year, from 2021 back to 2020, during COVID and all of that, what had occurred, and all the politically correct statements that each and every institution eventually came out and acknowledged that they will address and work with communities of color in different ways. So, that had occurred over this past year. Now, I was looking at my shows from last year till now, the podcast shows from last year to now, and going back to show number 34, it just gives you an indication of what, from my perspective, what had occurred from that event to all the way to now, from May 25th, 2020 to today, May 25th, 2021. Now, I actually did a show on May 30th entitled Black Rage, Wake Up America. And I talk about how the tragic death of George Floyd, who died being arrested by police officers in Minneapolis, as I said, just a few days there, this was by far the most disturbing event that I witnessed on video, in which this African-American man was brutally treated and lost his life. And was unfortunately so. The purpose of conducting that podcast show at that time was look for justice, short-term and long-term peaceful solutions, and better understanding of a multitude of issues affecting the African-American community and all the other communities who are different than mainstream America. It's time for America to wake up. And that's what I said in 2020. Wake up. Because the protests and everything that happened after that spilled over into U.S. cities, and it caused a rage. And that rage occurred and I didn't say it was just, it happened. Then my show 35, Black Rage, Wake Up America, Part 2. And I said, from my perspective, we have lost sight of the real issue already. For the folks that have spoken with during the past couple of weeks, we're looking for change of behavior, beliefs, understanding, and heart from mainstream America. Mainstream America. And again, I share with, in that particular podcast show, I shared my point of view, my personal points of view, and just laid it on the line. When are we going to wake up? That was on June 16th, 2020. And then show 36, preparing for what college students should expect from academia in 2020 and 2021. And I actually said now majority of colleges and universities made their institutions statements against racism, discrimination, and injustice. And I said there were more likely to be more new programs, initiatives, college courses, webinars, discussion groups, and committees and offices developed to address these issues. That was in July. And that did occur across the board, across the country, and practically all majority colleges and universities. And I took, as Dr. B, I took a part of several discussion groups, several special university brainstorming and dialoguing sessions throughout the year. As a matter of fact, when you're a person of color at a university, all of a sudden you get noticed because this event was real. So I was called to assist in the discussion and getting to at least sharing some of the real issues, the frustration that's been boiling for years in various communities, particularly African American community. And then I did show 37 pushback. I did also enough, August 29th, enough, where unfortunately all the talk, and in that show I talked about the latest shooting of African American males by police officer Jacob Blake. In the wake of this incident, I also highlight the George Floyd tragic shooting. So again, events were still happening to the African American community and to African American males in our country. Three months after the George Floyd incident, tragic incident, Jacob Blake in August 2020. And then, of course, the election of the president, the presidential election started to tick up in September, and trying to get the vote out, trying to make sure everyone votes are counted. So I did a show on Your Vote Makes a Difference, and then did a show on, in October, the presidential debate, Biden versus Trump, and tried to share with the listening audience what were the major issues brought up by the both candidates. And then vice presidential debate, Harris versus Pence, brought up the major issues from vice presidential candidate at the time, Harris and Pence. And then did I followed up with the presidential debate number 2 show. And again, recognizing now, and the reason why I did these shows, I said in this show number 42, however, the topic of race was still not a major priority among the candidates, and it was interesting how they responded to when race was the issue. And I posed the question: Are we really satisfied as to how our presidential candidates talk about race in America today? At that point in time, and then show 43 presidential election, Biden, vice president, what's going to happen. I even did a projection what's going to happen when they're in office, and over, and it's very interesting. That was again telltale show. My prediction of the acceptance speech and the initiatives and how the new administration will address race relations in our country. And so I continue to follow that theme. What will happen to race and race relations in 2021? That was for the new year. It showed 45. And then show 46, what would Dr. Martin Luther King think about race in America, the inauguration, and then followed up by show 47, inauguration of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And then I addressed race and the vaccinations, COVID-19, race, and then followed up with racism and violence towards Asian Americans. We had a tragic event in Atlanta targeting Asian Americans in March, just a few months ago. Tragic event. And again, how the country addressed it, how our politicians addressed it. And at that point in time, and still, there is racism being directed at specific groups. There's no doubt about it. And there's multiple reasons why. But again, it occurred after George Floyd. This was different, obviously, but again, these things are happening to specific racial and ethnic groups in our country in 2021. What do you think about that? So that was just in March. And I followed that show up with a panel discussion that I was asked to organize on human rights and social justice for the Society for Applied Anthropology. And I thought we touched upon some great issues, trying to make it a teachable moment. These tragic incidents, and in that roundtable, these tragic incidents occurred and unfortunately will continue. And yet we need to be more proactive. And when I say we, all of us who are concerned, be more proactive and use our skills to resolve these issues, to define it, to discuss it, to talk about it in greater detail, and provide concrete strategies, new tools, new skills for reducing racial violence, reducing racial hatred, and intolerance, and all the like. And we need to be clear that this starts when individuals do not feel comfortable around other individuals who do not look like them, whether it's just the general public or professionals or in different occupations doing their job. That is what still is occurring. When people are around other people who still do not feel comfortable and may use their position to control others just because their status may be different. They're in a certain occupation. So again, finding ways to improve race and ethnic relations is critical in our country in 2021, going on through this summer and to 2022. We had the big movement, the Black Lives Movement, and the acknowledgement and all these groups, and one group after another. And these statements, and all different celebrities jumped on board. And then there's political movement or political posturing. Let me say political posturing. Yet in each state, in each community, we still must acknowledge the tragedies that have been going on. Matter of fact, just a week ago, they were in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was the 100th. What is it? I think it's it was an anniversary of the Tulsa tragedy. Over 100 years. I think it was 100 years ago. And survivor of that tragedy went to Congress and testified that it was just based upon hate, where whites just killed blacks to run them out of the town. And that's well documented. And a survivor, I think she was 107 years old, testified, talking about that racial conflict over 100 years ago. I think it was something like that, close to that. But the African American lady, she was 107 years old, testifying. And the reason why I bring this up is that it's so important to provide clear evidence that unfortunately in our country we still are struggling with race and ethnic relations. From 100 years ago, from all the different situations that have happened in our country, from that point to now, from last year, the George Floyd, to now. And we see that unfortunately it is expanding to other, it has continued with other groups, but now it is more visible. That's what I'm trying to get to. More visible events happening, more visible to other communities, and the other communities are speaking up. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, the incident in Atlanta happening in the Asian American community, they acknowledge that they are in a better position to speak about the continual racism against Asian Americans, and as well as indigenous people are speaking up about it. So again, these are issues that need a voice, need a commitment, and need a strong support, not just statements, but initiatives to back up changing the landscape so our country can get used to the dramatic diversity that has already been happening, will continue in more waves than ever from 2021 all the way to 2030 and 2040. You can't turn back the hands of time. You can't go back in time. I'm sorry, folks. Mainstream America, we cannot go back in time. But we can learn better ways to really get along with each other. What a revelation, to really get along with each other and prepare the next generation for getting along with each other better, so they can communicate, talk to each other, not be afraid of each other, not stay in their bubble, but learn how to get along on a daily basis. On a daily basis. Now that our world is being, everyone feel ready to go out and have a great summer because of COVID. We've been under mask. Now majority of folks are being double dosed and vaccinated. Matter of fact, this weekend, Memorial Day weekend, there's going to be so much traveling across the United States, and people feel released. And now we are, not say we, American citizens, feel that we can go out and converse with others, be in social environments, be in crowds, and enjoy the events that happen during the summertime. But we need to be reminded that we still need to work on our individual race and ethnic relations on a constant basis, how to get along. And let me just say that I do see a little change, even in my own neighborhood, that people are saying hi. People are acknowledging on a one-to-one basis. I have to give props to that. Individually, able to talk to people who normally don't say hi, they're saying hi, and we're all are willing to communicate and get along, but people are making extra efforts. I got to give that. Seen it in just in my community, and also here in the town that I live. People are socializing better, communicating better, willing to communicate. Not just to be quiet all the time, just not to be walking by individuals, but actually communicate. Say hi, greet each other, look at each other in their eye, and with a smile. Those are just most subtle things to reduce the tension, because at this point last year, there was a lot of tension in the communities across the country. We couldn't even look at each other. You can feel the tenseness in the air. And that's the reason why I did a show on rage. The rage was there. But now, in 2021, the rage is still there, but not ready to explode. It's much smoother. Because we have seen some increments of changes, but not near enough. Like I said, not near enough. Not enough all the political posturing. It's about time for action, and it's time to see the action and reaction from others. And we have to be committed to it. That's my major the thought, and that I really want to leave you with. We need to be committed to it. Not just acknowledge that something happened and we did the proper thing and finding the perpetrators wrong for different incidents, or for this particular tragic incident to George Floyd. We need to be committed to all the initiatives that we talked about and have all these town hall discussions, and when race was number one priority on the list, but now it's ticked down to I don't know where it is in politics or in our country today. So we can't just put it on the back burner anymore. It needs to be the top priority, and we need to be committed to the discussion of it, the initiatives, and support of all the different initiatives that will bring all of us together equally. Thereby, we will change the landscape that way. So, again, I wanted to do this show to acknowledge George Floyd, that his passing was not in vain. Was not in vain. And I remember how I felt viewing that tragic video. And I want everyone to remember that, unfortunately. We do have to remember that, because that's just earth-shattering. It just shakes you to the core when you see something like that. So, again, it's about being committed to how you felt when you saw it, being committed to now taking action and putting it in place, and being committed that each and every one of us change in some form or fashion. That's what it comes down individually, how each and every one of us must change for the positive after this tragic event. There you go. That's show number 51, George Floyd, 1 year later. I want to thank my sponsors again, Podbean. Apple Podcasts, iTunes, Google Play, Tune in, Listen FM, iHeartRadio, as well as Audible. And of course, I want to thank my publisher, ABC Clio, again for publishing my book and continuing to bring it to the forefront and with ABC Clio and all your marketing. So thank you, ABC Clio, and all the folks that have helped me with that book. So again, this is Dr. B. Enjoy the holiday season and enjoy summer 2021. Peace, everyone. We out.